están? Muy buenos días. Good morning, everybody. Vamos a empezar nuestro primer taller del día. We're going to start our first workshop or presentation for today. Tenemos el inmenso gusto y honor de contar hoy con Theofanis Karafotias. We have the great pleasure to have you here. Theo es un gran amigo del centro. Tenemos varias ideas de colaboración, así que nos vamos ya conociendo durante algunos años. You understand, right? Excelente. Él habla un poco de español. Vamos a empezar con la charla de Theo. Theo viene del Instituto de Conservación Getty. Él es un especialista en manejo de colecciones. Es por esta razón que en el marco principalmente del programa de maestría que tenemos es que organizamos este taller. Antes ha tenido una vasta experiencia. Hasta el año pasado estaba en Abu Dhabi, en el Museo Louvre de allá. Y bueno, ha tenido también una gran experiencia en todo lo que es manejo de colecciones, historia de arte, museografía. Tiene mucho que contar y de hecho tenemos el gusto de tenerlo por acá para la presentación From Acquisition to Display, Live in a Museum. Theo, again, welcome here. Thank you for having given us the opportunity to see your work and a little bit of your experience. And, well, the floor is all yours. Thank you.
Buenos días a todos. Gracias por venir hoy para esta presentación. Me llamo Theo. Hablo un poquito de español y por eso hago la presentación en inglés, perdón. Pero hay traducción, quiero. So, hi everyone again. Welcome to this presentation. Today's presentation, I will try to cover a little bit what are the main collection management tasks within a museum from the time we acquire an object until it finally reaches its display in the galleries. I will start by telling you a little bit of my background, and then we'll see the collection management practices within a museum, from actions that need to be taken even before an artwork joins our collection until it comes to our collection with the initial assessment. We'll talk a little bit about storage, a little bit about preparation for display, monitoring and housekeeping, and I will touch upon emergency response and policies and procedures. At the end, I will tell you what we do currently at the Getty regarding collection management and sustainability. So I studied conservation of works of art in Greece, and I worked for the Greek Ministry of Culture for about 14 years, working mostly in conservation projects around wall paintings, easel paintings, and paintings on wood. Later on, I decided that I wanted to continue my studies, and I studied heritage management and museum and gallery practice. And I found myself in Qatar, working for the Qatar National Museum, preparing the collection for the new museum inaugural exhibition. Brand new building, brand new exhibition. Everything had to be prepared for that. Later on, I worked for the Louvre Abu Dhabi for 6 years almost. And I was the collection manager there. The museum was open when I arrived, and I was coordinating 3 units practically: conservation, registrars, and museography. So I will not go through the definition of what is collection management. I'm sure you'll cover that in the course, but I want to highlight at this early stage that collection management is a core function within a museum. And the collection management team needs to coordinate and collaborate with all stakeholders within a museum, from security, to cleaning team, the curatorial team, facilities management, technical team is important to work with, education team, visitor services team if there is one. So you have to coordinate with every team in the museum in order to ensure safe operations around the collection, whether in the galleries or in storage. So who is part of a collection management team? Who is collection management team? Yeah, but in a museum structure, who is under the collection management? So if we have a museum organizational chart, who is collection management? Conservators? I cannot hear you. Could be. Let's go to the next. So I would say that registrars are part of collection management team, conservators, art handlers, if you have in your museums, or they're called preparators in some countries, mount makers, database officers or documentation officers. All these expertise are part of the collection management team. I would say also that conservation scientists can be part of the collection management team. If you have in the museum, a photographer could be part of a collection management team. If you have in-house photographer, researchers, and exhibition designers for sure. So people that they are specialists in light and display. This can be part of a collection management team. Curators usually are a separate team in the museum, but very often they are undertaking collection management tasks. So it's the team that collection management team is working more closely with. So sometimes we have to perform some collection management tasks even before an artwork arrives in our museum. So we don't have the artwork yet in our hands, but still there are certain things that we need to do. I will try to clarify how we can have a new artwork in our collection. So it might come from an excavation or a new field discovery. It might be a gift or a donation, a bequest. We might purchase artworks from art galleries and art fairs. We might engage contemporary artists or communities for artwork creation, or we might commission contemporary artists to create artwork specifically for us. In any case, we have to start thinking about packing material and how we will transport the artwork in our premises, what type of crate we will use, if we need to contact insurance company to insure all the shipment and the transfer procedure against any losses. We need to contact a shipping or an art handling company to make all these arrangements for us and make sure that all the documents are in place before the artwork arrives in our museum. If it comes from abroad, we need to make sure that there are export licenses. If it's a product like ivory, we need to have a CITES permit because ivory things cannot travel freely in between countries. So all this have to take place even before the artwork arrives here. Once the artwork arrives in the museum, we need to start with the initial assessment of the artwork. We need to understand what we have in hands. In order to do that, most of the museums are using collection management systems, as we call them, databases. I have worked with Museum Plus and IMU in the past, but I'm sure there are a lot of software out there. So no matter what software or what database you're using in your museum, it's good to refer maybe to ICOM object ID standards and guidelines and at the Spectrum guidelines, because they give information on how to register and how to manage your collection in a more structured way. They're useful resources, you can go through them. So once the artwork arrives in our hands, we have to register the artwork. We have to put the basic information in place so we know what we have and where it is. So you have to create a new record and attribute a new unique inventory number. Usually the inventory number consists of letters and numbers. The letters represent the organization, so it's up to you to choose. Your organization has chosen already. The second part might be a date, and the third part a sequence number, or there might be a different numbering system, but be consistent to that. And my advice is use dots in between numbers and letters and not space, because space is not a character, can create a lot of mistakes when typing, when searching, double space, no space, so it's more complicated. It's better to have dots. What is important at this phase during registrations is for each institution to define what are the minimum number of fields in the database that we have to input information in the record. So it could be the inventory number, the title, the artist, the date, the origin. You decide which are important for you and make sure that when you register an artwork, all this basic information is there. Try to be consistent. Try to maintain common language spelling so it's easier to search in your database. Create vocabulary lists that suit your own collection so you can use the same words and the same terminology when you register artworks. Later on, curators, researchers, or documentation officers will add more information in the database and in the record, like a more detailed object description, bibliography, artist information, or even a label for the exhibition. Don't forget to tag your artwork with the inventory number. Use archival tags and cotton twine and select carefully where you're going to attach the tag on the objects. Of course, this is not possible for small size items, so we tag the boxes. And establish a labeling methodology per object typology and be consistent with it. For example, if you are aiming to mark with a pencil the inventory number on the backside of a photograph collection, choose the same spot, bottom right, not up left, bottom right. Be consistent. So people know exactly where they will be able to find the number, and they will handle the object as less as possible. What is important also when an artwork arrives to our collection, a new artwork, is to examine it closely and do an initial assessment and conduct a condition review. Part of this initial assessment is to check the artwork for pest infestations. Do we know which materials are prone to pest infestations? What type of materials? Mostly organic materials, so paper, textiles, wood, parchment, leather, feathers, whatever is of organic nature might have pests. We don't know where the object comes from. We don't know what condition it was before it arrived in our museums. So if we're in doubt, we should either isolate the object or treat it precautionary. I know that most of the museums might not have the means to treat artworks against pest infestations. So what you can do is isolate the artwork for a certain period of time and monitor it before you enter it in proximity to the rest of your collection. Just do not risk pest infestations. Once you have a pest infestation in your collection, you need a lot of resources to get rid of it. So, and we are reaching now the condition report. So a condition report is a formal document that records the physical state of an artwork at a specific point in time. In our case, it's upon arrival to our collection, to our institutions. Typically, it may include detailed observations, structures, surface, existing damages, and it's often supported by photographs or diagrams. We can include multiple information in the condition report. We might include environmental parameters that are the best for our object. We might have some general instructions about handling. We might have information whether the object is suitable for display or suitable for loan, or if the object is necessary to be part of a rotation program. We will see later on about that. Conditions reports are very, very important because they can serve as a baseline for comparison. So if any damage or deterioration occurs, we have something to compare with. We can monitor the object, having a condition report. It provides accountability as we can see through the condition report at which stage a damage occurred to the object. So we have a sequence of checks. It's very useful for conservation planning, of course. When you have the information about your object, you know if you need to intervene and treat it. It's useful for insurance purposes. So if a damage or loss occurs, the condition report will serve as a proof that something changed, and you can claim your insurance. And of course, it ensures best practices. Now, what is a condition check? I've seen people just confusing condition report with a condition check. The condition report, we saw what a condition report is, but the condition check is when you just look at your objects and you compare with an already existing report. You don't need to do the condition report again and again. Just check against the record that you have. And if you see any changes at any given point in time, you can add to this report. So maintain one record per artwork when it comes to condition reports and keep a history of it. So if every 1 year, for example, you are checking your artwork and you don't see any change, you just mark no change, you can add photos and just attach it to the record that you have. Just maintain one record with multiple information. In case of a treatment, the condition report might need to be revised heavily. As we said earlier, condition reports usually contain photographic documentation, like overall views, details, or whatever you think you need, as many images as you think you need to document your artwork. Use colored scales that allows you to make comparisons if there are any color changes, and also you can make corrections if needed. Sometimes it's also advisable to take images for publication purposes or other communication and marketing purposes. So avoid taking the object back and forth to all the images at once. Based on the typology of our collection, you might also choose to scan. So if you have a manuscript collection or a book collection, you might choose, instead of photography that is time consuming and large files, you can scan all the pages of a manuscript. So this is available for all stakeholders in the museum, and you minimize handling when people want to access the content of the manuscript. Another stage that is very typical in the process is scientific analysis. So if you need more information that you cannot observe with your eyes, you might want to answer to certain questions about your object, then you have to perform different type of analysis, understand the materials, how the object was constructed, through technical photography. I'm sure you will get a lot of information about that in this course, so I will not get more in details, but this is part of the process. Once all of this information has been gathered, we have to consider whether we'll proceed with an intervention or not, if it's necessary or not. When you plan a conservation treatment, just remember three things that are crucial. What are the objectives of the treatment? So am I doing a treatment just to stabilize the object, or just to clean the surface, or just to improve it aesthetically because it goes on display? So what are the objectives of my treatment? According to that, you have to define the methodology that you will use, which includes the materials and the techniques. So you need to know in advance how you will achieve your objectives. And of course, you have to define a timeline and a budget, because all museums or institutions require that. You have to know how much this will cost. At some point, whether the artwork goes from conservation to display or other operations are happening in the museum, everything will pass from the storage. I will not talk too much about storage. I will just say some thoughts about storage. Make sure you use inert and acid-free materials. Customize your boxes and your paddings per artwork. There are not one solution for everything. Try to use archival materials or plastic containers. And I would say avoid tape. When you have to wrap something, avoid tape. When you try to remove the tape, you might put some pressure on part of the object that you cannot see because it's wrapped, or tapes can leave residues as well. Avoid wooden furniture or wooden pallets in your storage. Wood emits VOCs and also harbors pests. And definitely do not store objects on the floor. In case of any problem, of any leakage, the water will end up on the floor and you have your object damaged. If you need to have heavy objects on the floor, use plastic pallets instead of wooden pallets. What's important about storage is that some of the materials might need more specific control in terms of temperature and relative humidity. In that case, you can use airtight plastic boxes with desiccant material like silica gel to create microclimate and have these items stored safely. You can replace the silica gel periodically by monitoring the humidity levels. There are some relative humidity strips, I guess, that you can have it visible in a plastic transparent container, and you can see the level of humidity. And you can replace the silica gel, which can be regenerated with heat. So if you have an oven, you can put the silica gel in the oven, regenerate it, you can use it again. You don't throw it away. Handling is very important when coming to artworks. Most of the damages during an artwork lives come during handling. So you have to establish very clear guidelines and safety guidelines for all operations when moving artwork. So for example, if you have to move a painting and you have this equipment, the A-frame, just make sure that everyone is moving the painting using the A-frame, not just carrying it around. follow instructions that the conservation team has defined when handling objects. It's useful to add those instructions in the packaging or together with the object, so anyone who is going to handle the object knows where to grab it, where the weight is, and how to manipulate the artwork. Avoid carrying objects around long distances, and always use a trolley, even if the objects are of small size. And for sure, remove rings, bracelets, lanyards, because all these can scratch an object while you're handling. The big debate now. Gloves or no gloves? How many of you say gloves? It depends. Above all, you need to remember that gloves aim to protect you first, because the object might carry dust or from hundreds of years that might be harmful for our health. So above all, gloves protect ourselves. However, when it comes to the artwork, sometimes it's better to wear gloves, but sometimes it's not advisable to wear gloves. You can use cotton gloves as well with objects that they are smooth, but for objects that they have really some points or some edges, it's better to use nitrile gloves. When it comes to paper and textiles, it's better to handle them with bare hands. They are softer than nitrile glove, but we have to make sure that our hands are really washed and dry. What is important during the process is that we update the location of an artwork during every moment. We need to know at every given moment where each artwork of our collection is. Museums today are using a barcode system. It's like the barcodes you see on all products, so they can track their objects around in the gallery. And using the barcode system, you minimize human error, because you just scan. So you cannot mistype a location or an artwork number. You just scan the barcode, and it immediately fits into your database. Preparation for display. So we did everything, and now we have to put the artwork on display. So what do we need to assess at this point? Any ideas? We just put it in the gallery, or we need to assess things before? Safety can be one. Other aspects that you can think of? Sorry, I didn't hear you. The condition of the object, yes, and the needs. Let's see a few things. So from a collection management perspective, I mean, the relevance is something that the curatorial team will decide. So the curatorial team is going to decide how, which artwork will be displayed with what. But from a collection management point of view, we need to assess the environment in the gallery, the light in the gallery, the display elements that we will use, showcases and podiums, different material that we will use for the display. We have to define the mounting and the safety, as you already said. So let's see a little bit this aspect. So we always have to consider if the gallery climate is suitable for the objects that we are going to display. If the object requires any special display parameters, such as temperature or relative humidity, we should consider microclimate enclosure. This can be an airtight showcase with silica gel or a mini clima. For paintings, there is a methodology to use a climate box, which is an enclosure on the back and forth of the painting using a glass and some desiccant material inside to keep the painting in stable conditions. So we need to assess this and see if we need to take any action. Light is quite important. What objects are light sensitive? Paper, textiles, paintings, photographs, prints, heathers. All these are light sensitive. So we have to make sure that they are displayed under the suitable light levels. So we need to assess if there is natural light in our galleries and if this will affect how we are going to display things. So we will not place a book next to a window. Let's discuss with the curatorial team and negotiate that this has to be placed in some other area of the room and not next to the window to avoid excess lighting. However, there are options that we can install filters in the windows, UV filters, or there are some membranes that reduce the amount of light that comes into our spaces, while at the same time it remains transparent. And for certain artworks that they are really high sensitive, we need to discuss with the curatorial team how we will rotate them. Because even if we keep the light low, it's still too much for some objects, not for everything. So there is a way to find out how sensitive an object is. There is a method called microfading testing. It's a little bit complicated, requires specific equipment and training, so just a few museums around the world are doing that. But what has been done already is that there are certain online tools that they have already done the research and tested different types of pigments, and they know how these pigments deteriorate with light, how much they are fading. So you can visit the Canadian Conservation Institute light damage calculator tool. And if you know the type of pigment or of painting you have in your artwork, you can go and set, you choose that, you set what will be the loss in 100 years of display. Here I have created 3 scenarios. So in scenario 1, I put it on display for 3 months per year. In scenario 2, I put it on display for 6 months per year. And in scenario 3, I put it on display for all year round. So an object that will have this type of red, after 100 years, if I choose scenario 1, I will remain with 87% of the color. The rest will be lost. If I choose to display it all year round, I will end up with less than half, which is 45%. So this is a way that I can take decisions on how often I have to rotate some items on our collection. Now understand that sometimes you might not even know what are your pigments or what are your materials because you don't have the way to do the analysis, or you don't have the time because you have a big collection. So what can you do? There are certain standards that they have been published by international organizations that give general categories of light sensitivity for objects. These are very generic. Most probably, most of your collection will fall in between those categories. However, if you have no other way to take a decision, you have to use something as a baseline to make decisions for your collection. So let's say, let's get an example that our galleries have lights on for 60 hours per week. Our object is aimed to be exhibited all year round at 150 lux. That would mean that our annual exposure for this object will be 60 hours times 52 weeks per year times 150 lux. And this is the result that we are getting. So if our artwork is a painting, we are safely displaying it within the recommended limits. Now, if our artwork is a textile, that means that we are overexposing it. So what do we do in this case? What can we do? We can reduce the level of light. So if we reduce the level of light to 50 lux, we see that the total lux hours are reducing and they are almost in the right level as the recommendation. 50 lux is the minimum that we can put in museums because most of the people can see, most of the young people can see, not the older people. Other things that we have to assess before putting an artwork on display is the showcases. So if we build a new showcase, we have to make sure that it's airtight as much as possible. The selection of the construction materials, because certain materials can cause deteriorations of heritage objects. So, for example, concentration of VOCs inside showcases can damage objects. VOCs can come from improper material like the wooden elements of the showcase or the gaskets or So we have to assess what material we are building our showcases with. The same goes for the plinths and all the wooden elements that we use in a showcase for display, the textiles that we choose and the fabrics. All this needs to be assessed. Some other things that need to be assessed are wall finishes, paints that we use either on the walls or inside the showcases, because these emit a lot of VOCs. VOC stands for volatile organic compounds, and accelerate deterioration for some materials. It's advisable to use zero VOC paints. Usually we can assess that by their technical specification datasets. If wooden panels are used, it's advisable that they are painted or sealed so we can avoid emissions from the wood. And even if zero VOC paints are used in our display galleries, it is advisable that we allow at least 4 weeks for off-gassing before installing the object in the space. I know it's difficult because usually the exhibitions are done quickly, but this is advisable. And then it comes mounting. Sometimes we do mount in-house, sometimes we hire a company to do the mounting for us, but it's the conservator, more or less, that will identify what are the fragile objects, the fragile parts of the object, so where the mounts to touch the object, how the weight will be supported, if the mount will keep the object safe against earthquakes or visitors tripping on showcases. So we have to consider all these things so the mounts provide a safe display for our objects. The aesthetical appearance of the mount, I understand that it's very important. We don't want to see mounts in the museum. Curatorial team wants invisible mounts, but sometimes this is not possible. So we always need to negotiate. Safety is also very important when it comes to display. So we have to take the decisions whether an artwork will go on open display, will go inside the showcases, behind glass. So the fragility of the object and the size of the object sometimes dictate what is the best solution. So again, it's a discussion that you need to do with the curatorial team on how to display objects. And make sure that there are protective measures against visitors. Visitors do all the crazy things in the galleries. Use steps, barriers, stickers, whatever you need to inform visitors. I would always consult the gallery teams, either security staff or visitor services staff, that they spend all day in the galleries because they observe people. They know how people respond and what they do in the galleries, and they can give you really useful advice how to protect your collection and ensure that all objects are firmly mounted against theft. So nobody can remove an object from the wall. There are some tags, sensors, that they are called motion sensors, that sometimes they are attached to objects. If you have, let's say, a frame with a graphic artwork that is just on display, it's small size, but it's on open display, people can really grab it. So when the artwork moves, this sensor will give a signal to the security control room, and they will know that the artwork is moving. So somebody has done something, so people can follow up faster. Now everything is on display. Can we sleep okay, or do we need to keep checking on things? I would say that we need to keep checking for things constantly. So monitoring is very important when it comes to exhibition. We have to monitor the climate, first of all. Some buildings, newer buildings, they have a climate monitoring system in place. It's called the Building Management System, BMS. But most of the historic houses, historic buildings, they do not have that. So we have to install sensors in order to follow and monitor the climate. We can have wireless sensors. We can have sensors that require electricity or with battery, sensors that transmit the information through Wi-Fi, or some sensors that we need to download manually. You decide what is best for your institution. There are pros and cons, and one of them is the cost, of course, of the sensor and the system that you are going to use, but monitor the climate so you understand what is the climate and the conditions in your galleries and in your storage. In case that we have an emergency situation, it's advisable that you assess the climate periodically, once per month, not every day. Just get the data for a month and see what has happened and if things are okay. But in case of emergency situations, so if something happened and I have a fear that things went wrong with either my climate control system or an extreme incident, check the data to ensure that everything is okay in your galleries. Another important monitoring task is about pests. So in that case, you need to identify what type of traps you need to get for the typology of objects and the pests related to them. You can examine those traps periodically, like every month or every 2 months. You don't need to do it closely. And in the case you encounter pests on the traps, then you need to do a more detailed monitoring to understand where the pests came from. Is it from an object? Is it from an external source entering the museum? So you have to assess the situation and take the appropriate action to mitigate the pest infestation. And some sensitive artworks might require periodical condition checks. So if you have something sensitive on display, you want just to do a quick check every 2 months, 3 months, a year. You will define what is that. And as we said earlier, you just attach its condition check in the conservation record of the artwork. So you keep track of the history of it. If you see any change on the artwork, you need to try and understand why this happened. Is it the climate? Is it a physical force? Is it an incident with a visitor? So you're trying to understand what has happened. What is very important when it comes to galleries and storage is housekeeping. Even if your building has the more advanced filters and systems that does not allow dust to circulate through ventilation, the dust will come in your space through the visitors. Visitors with the shoes, with the clothes, we all carry dust. Any type of dust particles will be deposited on our collection in the galleries. Identify, based on the number of visitors you have, identify the frequency you need to do dusting in the galleries. Not only for the objects, for the artworks, but also for the podiums and the mounts and everything. Dust is hygroscopic and attracts moisture. I have seen corrosion on metal objects because of dust accumulation on them. So we need to make sure we keep everything clean. Also, dust harbors pests, so we need to clean the space as much as possible using mostly water and minimize detergent in the galleries. It might interact with heritage materials. So I will move now to the emergency response, which I consider quite important as a preventative measure that is under the collection management scope. It's a big chapter, so I will say a little bit about it because we don't have much of a time. So an emergency response is consisted in 3 different stages. At first, we do some preparatory actions, so we are prepared for what might come. The second step is the actions that we are doing during an emergency. And the third step is after the emergency action. So after the emergency has been, after the incident is completed, what do we do in case damage has occurred? Let's see a little bit what that is. So in order to assess risks for our collection, you can use the 10 agents of deteriorations as they are defined by the Canadian Conservation Institute. These are the potential threats to our collection. So you have to assess these risks against probability and impact to your collection. There are a lot of risk assessment methods today developed. A lot of them include loss of value of the artwork, loss of value compared to the entire collection. These are a bit more complicated and they need a lot of time and resources to do that and to coordinate with multiple stakeholders in the museum. If you're not familiar with this, you can start with something that is a little bit more basic. So you can create a matrix defining probability and impact for each of the agents of deteriorations that we discussed. Let's take an example about earthquakes. So if you had to decide the probability of an earthquake in Peru, which one would you choose? Likely? Likely or moderate? It's not unlikely. It happens. It's not rare. It happens, right? So it will be, let's say that it will be moderate for this example. And now you have to assess what will be the impact to your collections if you had an earthquake in Lima. Let's take two different scenarios. So you're a museum that has implemented all the safety tasks like barriers on the shelves, very good mounting, all the artworks are perfectly stored with padding in between the artworks so they cannot hit each other, they cannot fall from the shelves. So in that case, what will be the impact to your collection if you are totally prepared? Most probably low, right? Insignificant. So you get a rate of 3. What if you're a museum that it's a new museum, you just opened, you were forced to move everything into the museum, but you didn't have time to take precautions, anti-seismic cells, you didn't have time to screw the cells on the wall, so everything is exposed. In that case, most probably, you had a severe rating for this. Next. Next. So based on the rating, so whatever is in the red scale, it means that we have to take action. These are the highest risks to our collection, and we have to take corrective action. Whatever is on the green area most probably is okay when we don't need to spend our resources. Usually we have minimum resources in our institution. So we have to focus on the risks that they are more relevant and more severe for our institution and our collection. So this is an easy way to see where your focus should be. Sometimes we think, oh, humidity might be the biggest problem, but we might find out that humidity is not the biggest problem for our collection. So we need to focus in other tasks. For example, and the next step, once we do the risk assessment, is to mitigate the risks. As we said, we need to take some action. So let's take the example of fire. If we see that the fire is a high risk for our collection, what do we have to consider? Do we have a fire protection system? Do our galleries have sprinklers or a fire suppression system? They might not have. Do we have firefighting equipment in place? Devices that we can put off the fire. Are they regularly maintained? Is the staff trained to use the firefighting equipment? Are we dependent on civil defense in case of fire, or we can do things internally? If we are dependent on civil defense, are they trained and well informed about our institution or not? Have we informed them? Did we have any training with them? So all this can help us mitigate the risks and reduce risks that they had the red color to yellow or green. So part of the preparedness is to draft procedures, to define artwork priorities. If you have minimum time, just say limited time to save a few artworks, what are you going to save during a general flooding? What is your more important artwork or your more sensitive artwork? You cannot expect people to take that decision when the incident comes. During an emergency, people cannot act rationally. So it's good to have all these things predefined. You can draft also instruction sheets telling people what to do in case of emergency. It's always useful to have emergency supplies in the galleries so people can find them easily and not have to run to a conservation lab or to the storage, which might be far away from the building. So keep basic supplies for crucial emergencies like water or fire nearby to your galleries. And do trainings with whole staff, all stakeholders on what to do and how to respond in case of emergencies. The second stage of the emergency response describes what we will do exactly in case of an emergency. So in that case, we need to define emergency scenarios and to define communication trees. So who is contacting whom? Who takes the decisions? What are the roles and responsibilities for people on site? What sequence of actions do we take? This is a big chapter. If you have more questions, I'm willing to discuss later, but I don't think I have time to go to this at this point. The next one. And the last stage of the emergency response is what you will do after the incident is over. So in that case, you have all the time you need to assess the situation. Don't do things in a rushed way. Don't start moving objects. If there was a general flooding and you arrive to the museum and the flooding has been dealt with, so there is no more water coming into your spaces, just think what you have, assess the situation, plan where to move objects. Don't start doing things in a rushed way. Yes. So always there is not one emergency plan on one recipe for all institutions. You have to customize your plan according to your building, how the building responds to different threats, according to your collection. So what is sensitive in your collection and not? What is the organizational structure that you have? You have conservators, you have to rely on security agents, and the overall resources that you have in hand. So draft your emergency plan based on this. The emergency plan needs to be drafted periodically, to be revised periodically in order to reflect the current structure of your organization. If things change, you have to revise your emergency plan as well. The same if you have artworks on display, rotating, or temporary exhibitions, you have to include that every time in your emergency plan. But things do happen, and we have to be prepared for them. I will give you 2 examples of emergencies that I faced in the past. So in one case, I was working for a museum that was about to open, a new purpose-built museum. We moved the collection to the new spaces, and the museum was meant to open 4 months later. So all the collection was inside the storage room. And there was a heavy rain, and the museum started leaking, but started leaking badly. So a lot of water, a tremendous amount of water was coming in the corridor outside of the storage room and in one of the storage rooms. We were lucky because we had nothing in the storage room, but we were totally unprepared. There was no planning. It was a new building. We didn't have time to do plans. We were totally unprepared. So nobody knew what to do, but we were lucky and no damage was done. There was another incident that I was working for a museum that was new building also, but open for a few years. And I received a call at 4 o'clock at night that during a rainfall, water started leaking in the galleries, a few drops. I said, okay, I'm coming to the museum to assess and see what we should do. By the time I arrived in the museum, security team called me again and said the frequency of drops was increased. So I gave the instructions to the security agents on site that they can start covering artworks in proximity to the drop. But they could do that because we had made a plan. We were very well prepared. We had done trainings with the security team, how to cover showcases and artworks, where to find the material, what type of material to choose for safe protection of the artworks. And by the time, and when I arrived there, the water was coming down in a more frequent way. So we decided to protect everything in the gallery, but firmly, with lots of layers of plastic, and make sure that nothing will get damaged. And it was good that we did that, because half an hour later, a tremendous amount of water came into the gallery from the ceiling. You cannot imagine, like a waterfall. Nothing was damaged, but we were prepared for that. We had a good communication tree. So the communication was transferred to the right people on time, and we managed to respond. As the last part of the collection management, I will refer briefly to policies and procedures and how they're important for our institution and for the collection management operation. So there is a clear difference between what is policy and what is a procedure. A policy would respond to what or why. It can be also a public document for everyone to see outside of the institution. So, for example, if we talk about an acquisition policy, we would say that our acquisition policy is to acquire new artworks to enrich our collection and our knowledge about it. This would be our policy. why we acquire things. But when it comes to procedure and we need to draft an acquisition procedure, this will define the how. It will respond to the question how we will do acquisitions. So it defines what steps we take in order to acquire an artwork. How do we choose? Is there a committee, an acquisition committee? Who decides eventually? Who is doing the shipment arrangement? Who is contacting the insurance? All of these things can be part of a procedure. This is an internal document. The benefits of the procedure is that they ensure consistency in our operations, define clear roles of each member of the team, what they should do. It reduces errors. It ensures compliancy. The procedures also assist with staff training, like the emergency response. When you have the emergency response, for example, you know how to train your staff because you have a sequence of actions and things to do. So you can organize trainings based on your procedures. And of course, in the case of staff turnover, the knowledge and consistency is maintained. So if a new person comes, they will not start doing something different. You have a procedure about that. All procedures need to be updated periodically and as per the needs of the institution. There is no clear rule on that. It's up to you to revise and see if you need to make amendments. And the last part of the presentation, I will talk to you a little bit about what we are working on right now at the Getty Conservation Institute. So I am part of an initiative called Managing Collections Environment, and we are trying to address sustainable control and management of collection environments for museums, archives, galleries, or libraries. The team is providing evidence-based processes and tools that empower decision makers who care and manage collections. So the components of our work is research, case studies, education, and dissemination. The team consists of both conservators and conservation scientists. But why do we do all this? Why are we talking about sustainability? I will try to go a little bit in the timeline of what has been done the previous years. So in the 80s and the 90s, the guidelines for environmental conditions in museums were somehow defined as relative humidity, 50% plus minus 5 being the ideal for the collection. However, this has been very unsustainable. It's difficult to maintain these values, and it requires a big amount of energy consumption. So there were a lot of climate change panels and conferences and discussions on how we can adopt broader environmental parameters in museums, because this is unsustainable. In early 2000s, the Smithsonian Institute in the US adopts new parameters, wider parameters, not the strict 45 to 55. And it's when a lot of studies started taking place about modeling and testing of materials to find out eventually if this 45 to 55 is ideal or if we can expand safely. In 2010, a lot of international organizations identified that broader parameters, namely from 40 to 60% humidity, is absolutely safe for most of our collection. More studies have been done and testing, of course, and in the 2020, those were revised. It were more widely accepted. However, not everyone is following them. So what does this mean? So in the 80s and 90s, the recommendation was here. These were the margins, but later on, after 20,000, the margins were widened. So we consider safe now to have our collection between 40 and 60 and a wider range of temperature as well. These are some of the museums that they have agreed to these parameters, to this protocol, which is called Green Protocol because it saves on energy, it's more sustainable. However, still a lot of institutions do not do that, and what causes problem is when it comes to loans. So if my institution is adopting the wider protocol, and then I want to get loans from an institution that has a stricter protocol, then they might not lend me the object. So there has to be discussion, communication, negotiation with the lending institution, because they might be convinced that their object will be safe as well. So what we do at the Getty Conservation Institute is that the conservation scientist team is doing mechanical testing or micro and nano indentation testing on materials and how they respond to difficult physical forces or temperature and humidity changes. And also we develop techniques to monitor objects on display and actually understand if there is any change or damage on the objects. It could be through photography, 3D scanning, or acoustic emissions, which is a method that measures elastic waves released during stress relaxation in material. It's quite advanced, but it can catch micro cracks on a wooden element very early, before the eye can see it. So the purpose of this is, when we develop our preservation strategy for the museum, not only to be based on the analysis of the environment and the analysis of the object, but also in how damage is defined by testing and monitoring. So by actual research and evidence-based information. So we have more reliable decisions on how to display our collection. Now I understand that not everyone can do all this testing. However, there are certain tools that have been developed that we can use in order to understand if our collection is at risk. One of them is Getty. It's free, available. You can all access it. It's not easy to use. It's a bit complicated, but you can try using it. I will give you an example what you can do through this tool, online tool. Let's say that you have a collection that it's in the galleries and your museum wants to close for renovation, and you are forced to move your collection to a temporary location that the climate is bad. So you have wooden objects, for example. So you can use this software, and you can indicate what is your current conditions in the galleries, what is the typology of your material, what type of wood, and what will be the new conditions in the galleries. And the software, based on modeling and a lot of testing, will tell you whether there is high or low probability of damage to happen. So you can take decisions easier. And with this, I'm closing the presentation for today, and I would be happy to respond to any questions that you might have or discuss further topics. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for...
Un vistazo muy amplio y muy completo. Tener y manejar una colección. Tenemos espacio para preguntas. Pueden estar gustan también con español y vemos cómo entendemos.
Yes, please. The monitoring is daily. You just check the data on a monthly basis. The monitoring is daily. It's consistent monitoring.
First week.
When you set up your system, you will have it like a trial period, a testing period, to make sure that your sensors are calibrated, that everything works well. So in the beginning, when you set up your system, yes, you might do even daily checks. But once your system is set up and you know that it works, once a month would be enough. Nobody is doing it more often than that. It's not feasible, unless something happens and you have an indication that something is wrong. Yes. Yes. In what aspect? In storage, on display, or what is your related to which part of? So things that you can do that it's low budget is housekeeping. Make sure that your storage is clean. Make sure that things are on the shelves properly safe against earthquakes or accessible, easy to find. Tagging, inventorying and tagging of your objects so you know where it is. So all these processes are very easy to do internally. You don't need expensive tool or equipment to do anything. Make sure you have that. Archaeological material is usually robust because it's inorganic material, except metals, that they are really sensitive to humidity, but it's easy to make micro enclosures. It's a cost efficient method to do. So you can find everywhere plastic food containers practically with gaskets, so they are as airtight as possible, and just add some silica gel that you can reuse and reuse. That's why I said you don't throw the silica gel away once it cannot function anymore. You can reuse it. Just put it in the oven and it's regenerated. So try to be as sustained. Our aim is to use materials and resources that are in proximity to us. We don't need to import everything. We don't need to do what is the best practice in Europe necessarily. We need to adjust to our collection. We need to find what works for us. We need to work with our climate, how our collection is acclimatized in our premises. So don't go for the crazy solutions. Try to be as practical as possible. Yes, please. Every? Oil painting or print? The light calculator, the tool that you saw online. So it might have all the pigments, or there might be some that they are not tested. So you need to see there is a drop-down list, and you need to see if the pigment that you have on your painting or your drawing or your manuscript, it's there in the database. If it's there, it means that it has been tested, and you can get safe results out of the software. If you don't know that, you can go with this very generic chart that I shared. Yes, of course. If it's on paper, it's more sensitive than if it's on a painting. So oil paints are more robust than paints on water paints or gouache. But this is the medium. It's not the pigment. The pigment is sensitive to light. So no. So
Try to reduce that ratio.
So if you don't have the mechanical means to reduce the humidity, maybe your building doesn't have any climate control system, you can install dehumidifiers to work certain time of the year. It won't do much, but what will be the real problem in high humidity levels is mold. So one way to avoid mold is air circulation. Try to have air circulation in your spaces if you cannot control the humidity at all. If you have no control over humidity, because you don't have the means to do so, try to improve air circulation. So the more showcase in is, the more stable the environment in the showcase will be. Eventually, it will be affected by the external climate. But if you have, what the showcases protect against is that if you have, let's say, during the night, you have really high humidity and during the morning is really dry, so you avoid this curve and these peaks because the showcase will maintain a more balanced level. So it will avoid all those peaks compared to the space. But if your space is overall at 80% humidity, at some point, the showcase will acclimatize. You cannot avoid that. Unless you have some desiccant material in the showcase. If you have silica gel in the showcase, the more airtight it is, the more efficient the silica gel will be to keep the humidity lower. That's why you can have a sensor in the showcase and monitor against the external environment. So you can see how much it works or not, if you need to add more silica gel or...
Profesor Karafotias, una pregunta general. ¿Cómo encuentra usted esta colección? ¿Qué es lo bueno? ¿Qué es lo malo? ¿Cómo mejorar el poco?
Did you get it? He's asking about the collection. Well, he knows that you've been checking things around, so he wants to know what you have seen of good about our collections. What are the challenges? And
Here.
Yeah, here
In Peru.
Yes.
What I have noticed is that the collections in Peru have been preserved in a really good condition, and most probably because of the dry climate that you have or the dry soil that you have. So I've seen in some museums textiles that they are like 2,000 years old, and I wouldn't consider this being preserved. So the collections are well preserved. What I have noticed in some spaces is that storages are not really well organized. They're not clean enough. There is a lot of wooden elements that it's harmful. But I've seen that there are a lot of people caring for collections in Peru. There are a lot of conservators, or the institutions are having conservators working with them. So this is a good thing. They know what to do. They know how to advise. My initial comment will be a little bit of best housekeeping and organization of the collections in the storages. You cannot do much with an old building, I understand that, but you can organize your collection in a better way, better packing, better storing conditions.
I think they wanted they wanted the formula for improving it.
There is no formula. There is no formula. That's what I'm saying. You have to take decision. You have to assess what are your risks. What is the risk to your collection? What is damaging your collection? And try to understand how you will mitigate that. What actions you can do. For each institution is different. Every institution has different problems.
Yeah.
It can be manpower. It can be expertise. It can be training that people might need. Access to materials. So each institution needs to identify what are the needs, what are the problems, and find solutions towards that. During the fire crisis, yes. So the Getty has two museum locations in LA. It's the Getty Center and the Getty Villa. The Getty Center was not affected by the fires, but the Getty Villa was inside the fire zone. The Getty Villa is quite well organized because they know they're in a fire zone. They have their own water tanks, their own firefighting equipment, and the teams know how to use them. So they responded really quickly. And actually, while everything else burned all around the Getty Villa was not affected at all. But they were prepared because they had the means. They knew what to do. They had the means. They had the water. They had everything they needed to defend themselves against the fire. No, nothing was affected. Absolutely nothing. Not even the gardens. So everything around the perimeter of the Getty Villa was burned, but nothing inside the perimeter of the Getty Villa, which includes gardens, buildings, restaurants, nothing was affected. There were teams that they were there 24/7, all day, all night. Yes, during these 3, 4, 5 days that it lasted. It was quite intense. No. From the visitors, no. You can have maybe for the shoes, if you have some carpet or something in the entrance, so people will step on that and will leave most of the dust of the shoes outside. But no, you cannot reduce the dust we carry with our clothes, for example. It will come in.
Yeah. Maybe we can do like mandatory showers before.
But yeah, this you cannot avoid that. It will always be there. And the more visitors you have, the more dust you have. When I was working in Abu Dhabi, we did a test, an experiment for dust accumulation, and we started just before the pandemic. And we saw, because we had like more than 1 million visitors per year, so we had a lot of visitors. And dust was accumulating in a rate of 7% per month, which was a lot. So we started 2 or 3 months before the pandemic, and then the museum closed. And we noticed that during the months that the museum was closed, there was zero dust accumulation, absolutely zero. So everything was coming in from open doors and the visitors. Yeah. So the systems were working perfectly, but you cannot avoid it. And we had a lot of dust, believe me, a lot. Sometimes we had to dust on a weekly basis. Every Monday that the museum was closed, the conservation team would be just running around the galleries dusting.
Well, Theo, thank you very much. I do have one question. Sure. Voy a hacer una pregunta, discúlpenme. In the framework of our master's degree that we are having right now, actually, there's a lot of students from master's degree, but I have started checking more about collection management and trying to identify what can be done to improve this. Now, your presentation has given us a great opportunity. You have stressed, like, in 3 different points, the fact, like, people were trained, firefighters were trained, the security guards were trained to check on a leak, and so on. So what would you think, or what is your view about a situation as probably many developing countries have this, but of course we all the time talk about budget, small budgets and everything, but one of the things is that most museums in Peru rely on a body of volunteers that stay for 3 months and later leave, and later comes another group and leaves, and even security guards. Most of the time they are rotating between different institutions because they are not hired by the museum, but they are part of a big agency that just supplies personnel for one or the other thing. So what I was checking is that even if a museum trains people, they volunteer, security guards and everything, 6 months later, there will be new people there. So what's your view about this?
So the training is a constant thing. Even for permanent staff, you should consider training at least once per year on certain response procedures. I faced the same problem in the past because when I was working in Abu Dhabi, the security team was rotating really fast and a lot of people were leaving. So what we decided to do is to draft some guidelines, basic guidelines that we would share with all new hires upon their induction week. So let's say the security manager that was permanent staff and was always there would inform with all this basic information. They will do some internal small size trainings for people to be informed about our processes. Some of them would do the training later on, some of them not. So you cannot be doing it every 3 months. It's too often. It requires a lot of resources and time. But you can draft guidelines for all these people that they join for a limited amount of time, so they know from the first day that these are the processes, this is what we are doing, and just give them a briefing.
Okay. Vamos a agradecer nuevamente a Theo por el conocimiento compartido, por estar acá con nosotros. Así que, Theo, thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, everyone.